Well, Bob Woodward, along with Carl Bernstein, once effectively brought down a presidency by sheer tenacity of their reporting. That's not the goal of Woodward's book about the Trump White House, the result of his latest exhaustive reporting effort. He says he did not write the book for any political reason, but as he told me, to give an account of what this White House is really like. Fear, Trump in the White House, is already causing certainly a lot of turmoil in the White House. All you have to do is check the president's Twitter feed to see that his publication has shaken him. I asked Bob Woodward about the response to the book and much more in an extended conversation earlier today. We started with something that the president's son, Eric, said on Fox News this morning. There's a lot I obviously want to ask you about the book. I do want to just ask you about something that was in the news today. Eric Trump was critical of obviously the book, calling it sensational nonsense. He said CNN will definitely have you on because they love to trash the president. It'll mean you sell 3 extra books. You'll make 3 extra shekels at the behest of the American people. Besides the fact that he doesn't know where the word behest, how do you actually use that word, some have interpreted his talking about shekels as kind of a dog whistle and basically an anti-Semitic dog whistle. Do you see it that way?
I just hope no one would talk like that, frankly. I think that just doesn't fit, and I'm sorry. Anyone talks like that, whether it's a dog whistle or whatever the intent is. It's not, I mean, part of the point of this book is that we need to have a serious debate about serious issues, and to use invective and this attack rhetoric or what, whatever it might be, it sets us back.
I want to. There's so much in the book to talk about, but one of you talked about having a serious discussion. One of the things that stopped me in my tracks when I read this book was, will you call what's happening in the White House a nervous breakdown of the executive power of the most powerful country in the world? That's a terrifying. As a citizen, that is a terrifying thing to read about a nervous breakdown in the executive branch.
I think that's exactly what it is, and it's supported by the decision-making and the discussion and President Trump's impulsive behavior on a range of issues from North Korea, Afghanistan, the Middle East.
Would you have said that in the Nixon administration there was a nervous breakdown in the executive branch, or is this... I mean, obviously it's apples and oranges, but is this worse than what you saw inside the White House then?
Well, it depends. Nixon was a criminal. My colleague Carl Bernstein always says this, and he's exactly right. It's the criminality. In the case of Trump, we don't know. The Mueller investigation is not over, and so we're going to have to wait on that.
Is there true allegiance to the president among the people in the White House?
Well, it depends. You can't put everyone together. What I do is cite specific examples, and I think there are kind of 3 pockets here of people taking actions like Gary Cohn, the chief economic advisor, stealing something from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office.
Which he said he was doing for the good of the country.
Yeah, not just for the good, but to save the country, to protect the country, because if that had been signed, you begin the unraveling of our relationship with South Korea, not just in trade, but in terms of the 28,000 military personnel we have in the country and the top secret intelligence programs. And so you can't separate those, and to do what the president wanted to do, just summarily say we're out of this trade agreement, the experts and the people interested in protecting the country said, no, we have to take action. And in my view, in reporting on this, these are acts of conscience by people who say that, yes, I'm taking a risk, but better to take a personal risk than to go down this road that the president, at least at a number of points, wanted to take.
It is fascinating in these statements that Gary Cohn has put out, Rob Porter, even General Kelly, which clearly, from all the reporting, there's been pressure in the White House to have everybody put out statements criticizing the book. They're not actually disputing most of your quotes. I mean, Kelly says he didn't call the president an idiot, but he says nothing about crazy town. He says nothing about off the rails. Gary Cohn...
And other people have reported before going back in May that the chief of staff of the Trump White House called the president an idiot. So,
and Gary Cohn, in his statement, said the book, quote, does not accurately portray my experience at the White House. That doesn't really mean anything. He's not refuting any of these direct quotes.
that's quite correct. Carl and I used to call this the non-denial denial, that these are security denials to protect people's reputations with Trump. But, you know, look, I'll stick with the reporting. It was done in a very meticulous, careful way that Carl and I really, quite frankly, I learned from Carl. Go knock on people's doors. Ben Bradley, the editor of the Poster in the Nixon case, said, let's get two sources if we can on something. And this is my report on what goes on in the Trump White House. And you asked the question, well, why would you call it a nervous breakdown? Because it is a nervous breakdown. In the human body, if it has a nervous breakdown, it means that part of the body is doing something uncoordinated with the core mission of the body to survive, or however you might define it. But this, when I learned about this, I was shocked. I was surprised.
We're going to have more in my interview with Bob Woodward ahead, including how he got so many people to talk and how much of all of this is actually on tape. Do you have a sense of what percentage of interviews you actually recorded? Do you have a sense of what percentage of interviews you actually recorded?
Almost all of them.
Wow.
The deal was I would interview somebody. They would be a confidential source. They're not. I know who they are. Right. They're describing specific events. Often there are diaries or notes or documents supporting it. And then I would just, a couple of times people would say, I want to go off the record. And I said no. Very interesting lesson for me. When you say no to off the record, then people, and almost in every case, maybe except one, said, okay, I'll tell you anyway on deep background so you can still use it. You
can use it, but you can't just say where it came from.
That's exactly right. And so if you were, and this goes back to the Watergate coverage, when all the notes came out, when all the tapes came out and so forth, it turned out that our coverage, Carl Bernstein's coverage and mine, was conservative. It was restrained. And when somebody looks at this in 20 or 30 or 40 years, boxes of recordings and documents, they will see that this was very carefully done. I know, I can argue with a straight face that an ardent Trump supporter would read this and have to have pause, because whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, it's a management issue. How the White House, how the administration is managed, and this is the nervous breakdown.
At one point you also said, you write about the anarchy and disorder of the White House and Trump's mind. I understand the anarchy and disorder of the White House, the way it's set up. In Reince Priebus, you have him quoting, when you put a snake and a rat and a falcon and a rabbit and a shark and a seal in a zoo without walls, things get nasty and bloody. I mean, that's an unbelievable way to describe the White House.
And that's from the former chief of staff. And there is time and time again, not just in the economic area, but I think in a more significant way, the national security area, where the president is absolutely horrified that we're spending money to have troops in Europe or
a missile defense system in South Korea.
Yeah, I mean, here he is, the greatest missile defense system that we have, and there are top secret special access programs that allow us to protect our country. We're not doing this just for the South Koreans, and the Secretary of Defense is in there in a very emphatic way saying, look, these are the best national security dollars we spend. And the president won't let up, and he's saying, you know, we're being played for suckers. We'd be so smart if we'd make so much money. Well, the idea is to protect the country, and so you finally have the Secretary of Defense says to the president, we do this to prevent World War III. Now, I've spent a lot of time with 8 other presidents looking at how they handled the office in war or in the economy and so forth. And they all knew that protecting the country, preventing World War III, preventing a nuclear weapon from going off in the United States is job one.
Right.
This occurred not in the first week of the Trump presidency, but Trump had been in office a year, and there is still this debate going on, and leads to a lot of frustration and a lot of anxiety.
The book ends with John Dowd, the president's former attorney, saying he's an effing liar.
Yes.
And that's
exactly.
That's a stunning quote.
Yes, but here you have John Dowd, who worked with the president very closely for 8 months as his private attorney in the Mueller investigation. And they go through step by step, and the issue gets down to, is the president going to testify? And so they run a practice session in the White House, and Dowd plays Mueller and asks all kinds of questions, and the president makes things up, lies, explodes, and at the end Dowd says, you can't testify. I will not sit next to you and allow you to do this. You will perjure yourself, you know, out of control. And the president first agrees he's not going to testify, but then he says, the president can't be seen taking the Fifth Amendment, so I've got to testify. He changes his mind, is insistent, and it's very poignant, the phone calls between Dowd and the president on this, because Dowd really wants to stay and help him, but this is the red line, if you will. I am not going to let you testify and be your lawyer. And so President's so insistent that Dowd finally resigns.
It's a fascinating book, Fear, Trump in the White House. Bob Woodward, thanks so much.
Thank you.